In this episode, we take a very real problem that makes organizations stumble during AI incidents and turn it into something you can picture clearly. A cross-functional playbook that tells everyone who does what when an AI risk event hits. Beginners often assume that if an organization has smart people, the right response will naturally happen, but incidents rarely wait for people to get organized. The first few hours of an AI incident are often messy because different teams see different pieces of the problem and make different assumptions about urgency, ownership, and what actions are allowed. A good playbook prevents that confusion by creating a shared response map that works even when people are stressed and information is incomplete. The goal is not to make response rigid, but to make response reliable, especially when the incident touches customers, sensitive information, or high-stakes decisions. By the end, you should understand what a playbook is, why cross-functional coordination matters for AI, and how roles and decisions fit together during fast-moving risk events. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A playbook is a pre-agreed set of response expectations that tells teams how to detect, triage, contain, communicate, and recover from an event. In the AI context, an event could be a harmful output going viral, a model leaking sensitive information, a decisioning workflow producing unfair patterns, or a monitoring signal showing a sudden shift that suggests drift or misuse. What makes AI events tricky is that they can look like technical failures, human misuse, policy violations, or reputational crises all at once, and different groups will label the same situation differently. A playbook solves that by giving a common language for what counts as an event, what the first actions should be, and who has authority to make time-sensitive decisions. Without a playbook, organizations often waste the most critical time arguing about definitions or waiting for the perfect person to weigh in. With a playbook, the organization can act quickly to reduce harm while deeper investigation continues. The first idea you need is that cross-functional does not mean everyone piles into the same meeting and talks at once. It means the right functions have defined responsibilities that fit together like gears, so work can proceed in parallel without conflicting actions. AI incidents often require security, privacy, legal, communications, product, data, engineering, and business leadership to coordinate. But coordination fails when nobody knows who is leading. A playbook defines an incident lead who runs the response and maintains a single authoritative view of the situation. It also defines functional leads who own decisions in their lanes, such as security containment actions, privacy assessments, or customer communications approval. Beginners sometimes think response leadership must come from the most technical team, but leadership is about coordination and decision flow, not about writing code. The most effective incident lead is the person empowered to make the process move, keep roles aligned, and prevent delays from turning into extended harm. To make the playbook usable, it should begin with clear triggers that tell people when to activate it, because many incidents start as weak signals. An AI risk event might be triggered by an internal flag from monitoring, a customer complaint that includes a screenshot, a report from an employee that sensitive information appeared in an output, or a discovery that a model is being used outside approved scope. The trigger does not need to prove harm occurred, but it should indicate potential harm is plausible enough that the organization should shift into response mode. A common beginner mistake is to wait for certainty, but certainty usually arrives after exposure has grown. The playbook should instead encourage early activation with a light touch posture, meaning contain what you can safely contain while you confirm details. Early activation also helps because it creates a single place where facts are collected and decisions are recorded, reducing the chance that separate teams respond in conflicting ways. Once activated, the playbook needs a triage step that turns a messy situation into a prioritized set of actions. Triage is where the response team rapidly answers a few key questions. What is happening? What is the likely impact? Who is affected? And what immediate containment actions are available? In AI events, triage must account for both technical and social impact. Because an incident might be small in system terms, but huge in public terms if a harmful output is spreading. A triage step also establishes event severity, which determines how much leadership involvement and how much communication is required. For beginners, it helps to think of triage as choosing the first safe move, not as solving the whole mystery. You decide whether to pause a feature, restrict access, disable a connection to sensitive data, or require human review before outputs can be used. If the playbook does not provide guidance on triage, teams often debate in circles or pick actions based on anxiety rather than risk. Containment is usually the most time-sensitive part, and it is where a cross-functional playbook pays off quickly. Containment is about stopping additional harm from occurring, which might mean blocking a specific prompt pattern, removing access to a model feature, limiting the system to internal users, or pausing an automated decisioning flow. Containment also includes preserving evidence, because you often need logs and records to understand what happened and to show due care later. Security teams often focus on preventing further exposure, while product teams focus on maintaining service continuity, and legal teams focus on reducing liability, so containment decisions can become contentious. A playbook helps by defining who can authorize which containment actions and what must be documented. Beginners should remember that containment is not a moral judgment about the project team. It is a safety action taken under uncertainty. The playbook should normalize containment as a responsible move, not as a sign of failure. While containment proceeds, investigation starts. An investigation needs clear ownership so it does not become a chaotic hunt. In AI events, investigation often includes checking what model version was in use, what data sources were connected, what prompts or inputs were involved, what guardrails were enabled, and what changed recently. It also includes understanding how humans interacted with outputs, because misuse and misinterpretation are common contributors to harm. A cross-functional playbook helps by assigning investigation tasks to appropriate roles, such as engineering examining system behavior, data teams examining data flows, and governance teams examining whether the use stayed within approved scope. Investigation also needs a clear timeline of events so that the organization can answer basic questions consistently, like when the issue began and how it was detected. Beginners sometimes assume investigation is purely technical, but an AI incident can be caused by a policy gap, a training gap, or a workflow design that nudged users toward unsafe reliance. The playbook should make it normal to investigate system, process, and human factors together. Communication is another area where cross-functional clarity matters, because AI incidents can become public quickly even when they begin internally. Communication includes internal updates to leadership and affected teams, and it can include external communication to customers, partners, regulators, or the public. The most common failure here is either silence that feels evasive or rushed statements that overpromise or contradict later facts. A playbook should define who owns communications drafting, who approves it, and what principles guide it, such as being truthful, focusing on harm containment, and being careful about unknowns. It should also define what is communicated at each severity level so teams do not invent messaging under pressure. For beginners, the key idea is that communications is not separate from risk response, because how you communicate affects trust and can reduce or increase harm. A clear playbook prevents mixed messages where one team says the issue is minor while another team is quietly pausing major features. Privacy and legal response needs explicit integration in the playbook because AI events often involve sensitive information, personal data, or claims of unfairness. Privacy teams help determine whether personal information was exposed, what notifications may be required, and what immediate steps protect affected individuals. Legal teams help assess obligations, manage evidence handling, and advise on the wording of external statements so they remain accurate without becoming misleading promises. Beginners sometimes think these teams only show up at the end, but delaying privacy and legal involvement can create unnecessary risk if early actions destroy evidence or create statements that later conflict with facts. A good playbook describes when to engage these functions based on event triggers, not based on personal relationships or guesswork. It also helps prevent the harmful pattern where technical teams attempt to self-manage an incident until it grows too large, at which point legal and privacy teams are brought in under crisis conditions. When privacy and legal are integrated early, the organization can move fast while still staying aligned with obligations. Business leadership and product ownership are also essential because many incident decisions are trade-offs between risk reduction and operational impact. Leaders may need to approve pausing a feature, narrowing scope, or accepting temporary downtime, and those choices require understanding both the harm risk and the business consequences. A playbook supports this by specifying what information leaders should receive, such as the current containment state, the estimated exposure, the severity assessment, and the next decision points. It also defines who can accept residual risk if a system must remain running in a constrained form. Beginners often think leadership involvement slows response, but it can actually speed response when decision rights are unclear because teams stop waiting for approval that never arrives. The playbook should establish that leadership is engaged at defined points rather than in an ad hoc way. When leaders understand their role as enabling safe action, not as second-guessing technical steps, the response becomes smoother and more confident. A cross-functional playbook also needs to define how to handle model and system changes during an event, because change is both a tool and a risk. Sometimes the right move is to roll back a recent change, disable a capability, or switch to a safer mode. But changes made under pressure can create new issues if not controlled. The playbook should define a disciplined approach to emergency changes, including what approvals are needed, what testing or validation is required at a high level, and how changes are documented. It should also define how to prevent scope creep, where teams keep adding fixes without understanding root cause, making the system more complicated and harder to stabilize. For beginners, it helps to see emergency change as a balance. You want to reduce exposure quickly, but you also want to avoid introducing a second incident while trying to fix the first. This is why the playbook should include a clear record of actions taken and a plan to revisit those actions once the incident stabilizes. Recovery is the stage where the organization moves from stopping harm to restoring safe operations and rebuilding trust. Recovery includes deciding when to re-enable paused features, what safeguards must be in place before full use resumes, and how to validate that the fix is effective. It also includes making sure that affected users are supported appropriately, such as correcting errors, addressing unfair outcomes, or providing clear updates if their data was involved. A playbook should define recovery criteria, which are the conditions that must be met before returning to normal operation. Without recovery criteria, teams may re-enable too quickly because pressure builds, or they may stay paused too long because nobody knows what success looks like. Recovery also includes a forward-looking plan, such as increasing monitoring sensitivity temporarily or adding review checkpoints for a period. Beginners should remember that recovery is not only technical, because trust recovery depends on showing that the organization learned and changed, not just that it restarted the system. Post-incident learning is where a playbook turns an event into long-term improvement rather than repeating the same mistake later. Learning includes root cause analysis, but it also includes identifying which controls failed, which signals were missed, and which parts of the response worked well or poorly. A cross-functional playbook should include a structured after-action review that happens even when the incident feels embarrassing, because embarrassment is often the reason learning is skipped. The review should produce concrete changes, such as updating the control library, improving monitoring signals, adjusting thresholds for escalation, clarifying policy language, or providing targeted training for misuse patterns. It should also improve the playbook itself, because every incident reveals gaps in assumptions, contact paths, or decision authority. For beginners, the key lesson is that maturity is not the absence of incidents. It is how quickly and honestly an organization improves after them. A playbook that ends when the incident is over misses the most valuable part, which is preventing recurrence. A playbook also needs to be realistic about human behavior, because the best process fails if people cannot follow it under stress. That means the playbook should use plain language, define roles clearly, and minimize steps that require special knowledge or perfect memory. It should also include training and practice, because people respond better when they have rehearsed what to do at least once. Practice does not mean a complicated simulation. It can be a simple walkthrough where teams discuss how they would respond to a hypothetical leak, a harmful output incident, or a drift discovery. Beginners often assume practice is a luxury, But practice is a risk control because it reduces hesitation and miscommunication during real events. The playbook should also support psychological safety, meaning people feel able to report mistakes and raise concerns without fear of immediate blame. When people hide early warning signs, the playbook cannot activate early, and early activation is one of the strongest protections the organization has. As we close, the central idea is that a cross-functional playbook is how you make AI incident response dependable, even when uncertainty is high and emotions are running. The playbook defines triggers, triage, containment, investigation, communication, and recovery in a way that assigns clear ownership and clear decision rights. It ensures that technical response, privacy and legal obligations, leadership decisions, and public trust considerations move together rather than fighting each other. It also builds in learning so the organization becomes safer over time instead of simply surviving one incident at a time. For exam thinking, a playbook is often the best answer when a scenario shows confusion, delayed action, unclear ownership, or inconsistent communication, because a playbook restores coordination and accountability. Most importantly, a playbook protects people because the fastest way to reduce harm is to know who is responsible for acting and what actions are allowed. When that clarity exists before an event, the organization can respond with calm precision when it matters most.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.